Anyways, you want to hit record?
40 years from now, when I'm laying on my deathbed, I'm going to regret it, and I'm just not going to let that happen. Commit the rest of my life to motorcycle adventure. I think that's what it's about for me. You know, I've been on the KTMs for a number of years now, and they've never let me down, and I'm just one of those people. I find something that works, I stick with it.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Ben Motorcycle Adventures Podcast. This is your hub for everything off-road, dual sport, and adventure motorcycle. And now, here's your host, John.
Welcome back, friends and listeners. This is episode 36, Adventure Rider, on the Ben Motorcycle Adventures Podcast. As always, thank you for joining, and thank you for listening. And hey guys, if you love to listen to this podcast, please take a moment out of your day and rate, review, and subscribe on whatever podcast directory you are utilizing. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of episode 36, Adventure Rider. If you haven't already figured this out, or you didn't already know, the guest for this episode is actually me, and our friend from Phoenix Handlebars, Jason Gerald, is here on the show to interview me about motorcycle adventure, what it was like growing up around motorcycles, the business, and life in general. So it was a really great episode. I'm thankful that Jason came out and did it, and I hope that I was able to answer a lot of questions about me that a lot of the listeners had. So hopefully this isn't viewed in a bit of a narcissistic light, but just want to get a little bit more information out there about me. And again, like I mentioned in the podcast, my about page on benmotorcycleadventures.com is pretty awful, so hopefully this is a little bit a better descriptor. But again, I want to thank all you listeners for tuning in, and without further ado, let's talk to me and Jason Gerald, episode 36, Adventure Rider. So I think you were episode 32, and I just want to take a second here to thank you, Jason, for being a part of that podcast. Very well received, very, I think, lighthearted episode, but it was really good to hear your story. So I think we're trying to really replicate the same thing here. And I don't know if you happen to catch all of my Instagram stories from Monday, but for me, that's what being an adventure rider is all about. And right or wrong, I think when we think about that, and we think about adventure motorcycling, we think about the big BMWs, the big KTMs, and riding around the world. But it doesn't have to be that. And I want to convey that message to everyone, especially people, especially listeners and people who are getting into the space, that you don't have to go do something crazy to be an adventure rider or ride an adventure motorcycle. They can be a collection of day trips to your favorite spots, grab lunch, go enjoy the landscapes. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to do something monumental, ride for weeks, months, years on end. That's not how it has to be. So I just want to kind of convey that message initially, that you could go 10 miles from home and have a great time. And in my opinion, I've been an adventure rider since 1985, and we'll get into that. So thanks for coming on and hosting this with me.
I'm excited to learn more about your story. You've been doing a heck of a job of giving everybody else a forum and a voice for what it is that we love. But heck, man, we want to find out, why do you love it so much? So
real quick, I mean, I get a lot of emails, a lot of inquiries, a lot of questions, and I thought, well, might be able to sum a lot of this up like an about page, which I have a horrible about page on my website. So might put this podcast in there, and then people could learn a little bit more about me too, because I'm not a big name in any way, shape, or form, but I've been on motorcycles forever, so I've seen a lot. So
where did it begin? Let's go back to, where were you born? Are you from that area?
Yeah, I'm an Oregonian. I'm not from Central Oregon, here where I live now. I actually grew up in a little town called Sweet Home. And yeah, it's just
sounds epic.
Yeah, it's it predominantly, I think back 70s, 80s, it was a logging town. I think that was kind of what the economy's built around, but somewhere I think in 85, I wasn't even 4 years old. Somewhere along the way, I got a PW50, like a lot of people who grew up in that area probably rode. And I don't remember much about, the acquisition of the bike or the first day it came home or anything, but I do remember my parents putting training wheels on it, and then we took it up to my grandfather's property, and I rode it up there, and it was really natural thing for me. And I do remember being a kid and going, all right, this is pretty easy. How do I go faster on the thing? And I think I was just trying to emulate what my dad was doing, because he raced locally pro here forever. And then obviously we watched motocross and supercross on TV. So I was just a kid with an imagination and probably a dream of racing professionally at some point,
Yeah. Well, so it's cool. So your dad was into it. So there was that family element.
Yeah, my dad lived and breathed it. He had one or two bikes at all times, and during the week he would work, he would go out and practice. We had all these areas that are there no more that we would hit, and I would go with him and ride occasionally, and then every weekend, we were racing somewhere, and my mom rode motorcycles. My sister, I think she had a three-wheeler or ATV, I can't remember. This has been some time ago, but yeah, we were just that kind of family at that time.
That's awesome. I'm jealous. I have some memories of me riding with my dad. He wasn't as big into moto. He was bass fishing was his thing, and I was into dirt bikes. But I remember the rare times that he had a dirt bike and we would just go like cruise around, and just how awesome that was. So that's super cool that you and the whole family have that bonding experience. And your dad's still alive, and I see you guys still moto together.
Yeah, just kind of rewinding that. Those were good days. When you're a kid, you probably take them for granted. I guess I would say I probably even expected those things. But the older you get, you realize, how precious that was. And then also, it was a really good time in moto. I think the 80s and 90s were pretty sweet. You go to the tracks, especially here in Oregon. I'm sure it's still pretty popular in SoCal, but gates were full, vendors, sponsors all over the place. I mean, it would be nothing to walk away with a lot of free swag. There was a lot of support. It was just a really cool time to be out there riding and racing, really.
So when did you start racing? How old were you?
So my parents may correct me, but I think I was 3.5, and I remember the first race. It was PIR, Thursday Night Motocross. If you guys have ever heard of that, that's a long-running tradition in Portland. Yep. And we went up there, and I'd been practicing with my dad on these little tracks, and I remember being intimidated by, the other kids. There was a lot of people, and also just the size of the track, the width of the track. That kind of weirded me out, like I hadn't been on track before. So went up there, raced under the lights, and I'm pretty sure I got 5th overall. I'm sure there's a picture of me somewhere with a trophy, which was cool. But I was also kind of bummed because I was a really competitive kid and I wanted to win. But yeah, first race, PIR, man, I can't say that, but under the lights, pretty cool experience.
That's a really cool experience. Man, you're living quite the life already. We're like what? Maybe like less than 10 minutes into this thing.
Yeah, and the ball kept rolling from there. I would say for the next couple of years, Arena Cross, Washougal, all these tracks we used to have, Clark's Branch, Territorial, which they're kind of still around, but they're kind of not the same. The list goes on and on. That's really what we did. We rode and we raced.
Did you get fast?
Well, I don't know. That's all relative. But here's what I remember: we rode a lot, and I don't remember losing too often. I think I was able to acquire a couple of state championships, which was, no small feat at that time. Again, there was a lot of kids out there racing, but admittedly, we took it pretty serious.
Did you continue to race like even through the high school years, or did you ever have any of those lulls where you just kind of got away from motorcycles for a bit?
Good question. It was a bit fragmented, and so is my memory, but at some point I broke my leg. Me and my dad were up riding at this place we would frequent. It was called, I think it was called Turkey Shoot. I don't know why it was called Turkey Shoot, but there was a little motocross track there along some power lines, and I was just a routine fall over. And this is kind of a weird story, but I tried to get up and I fell back down. And I did this a couple times and I couldn't stand up, and my dad was watching me and he thought I was messing around. I think he got kind of frustrated with me, and I was like, no, I can't stand up. There's something wrong with me. Well, lo and behold, I had broken my leg, and he ended up having to take me down to the doctor in town, which was, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes away. I don't remember it being too painful. I don't think it wasn't a compound fracture or anything, but that took me out of the racing scene for a while. And again, back to my fragmented memory, if that serves me correct, I think I reemerged a little while later, but on a Honda Elsinore, which is kind of another comedic thing. You know how moto parents and moto dads and all that goes. I was racing that mini class on that bike, and some people took offense to it, said it was an unfair advantage against all the PWs or whatever, what have you. And I remember at some point, my dad had to basically put it in one gear or something. I can't remember if it had multiple gears or whatever, but he basically, I know what he'd do. He had to take the shifter off. So to race the second moto one day, and I don't know if it was Pac West or Trans-Cal or CMC series or whatever, but I believe he had to take the shifter off, so I only had one gear, and then we went back out there, the gate drop, and the result was exactly the same. Now the second hiatus was a little bit longer, so at some point there I needed to move into the 60 class, obviously, and I can't recall if it was just me being intimidated by the power of the bike or the clutch or whatever, what have you, but I ultimately didn't make that transition after trying to ride 60s for a little bit. Just wasn't into it, but I was also a young kid, probably with a lot of other crap going on, so we didn't keep pursuing it on the 60s, which is kind of comical to me because I would reemerge again, kind of back on the scene a few years later, 12 years old, and I'm riding my dad's KX500 out through the desert. So it's kind of funny to me that the 60 maybe intimidated me, but the next thing you know, I'm riding a KX500. That's kind of weird.
So at that point, you just kept riding motorcycles, but you had gotten away from racing motocross and just became more trail focused?
Yeah, the riding was primarily pointed at off-road, and it was really cool because, we'd always gone to the races with this large group of people, 8 or 9 people, friends of my dad's. They all raced different classes, so you can remember checking out, the race order, and when you weren't racing, you'd be out there cheering somebody on. So it was a really cool, tight-knit group, but we all decided to get into trail riding, I guess. But at some point in the late 90s, my dad got back into motocross, so I got into it a little bit too. I was at least going to the practice days, and then Old Timer National rolled around, which my dad really loved to race these events. And if you're not familiar with the Old Timer Nationals and the format, it's a 2-day race that really caters to plus 30 guys with, there's a lot of long motos. I think there's 5 motos throughout the course of 2 days, but obviously I was only 17 or 18, so I had to race a support class, and I remember it like it was yesterday. 5th off the gate, passed 3 guys on the first lap, started chasing the leader, and a couple laps later I ate shit. And that was pretty much it for me racing motocross. I got hurt pretty bad. I was going through a whoop section, and there was 2 pretty sizable jumps that were tied into the end of the whoop section. If you hit them hard enough, you skimmed across the top of the whoops, you'd compress into that first jump, and you'd loft over the second one. And I don't know what happened that lap, if I hit it so hard that it made my wrist buckle and I twisted the throttle wide open, or if the slide stuck open on the carburetor, which turns out it could have been very possible. I think my dad had that happen to him a few months later over a big double, and he really got messed up too. But I just shot straight up in the air and fell out of the sky, and I knew I was in deep trouble when it happened. It's one of those things, you don't hear a sound. Hit the ground right on my back and my ass, and my mom was standing right there. She saw it all. I think it probably shook her up, but I hit the ground, couldn't feel a thing, and I literally thought it was over. I thought I was paralyzed. Thankfully, I was like, I guess you could say I was relatively unscathed considering the fall, but eventually the pain set in. I could feel, and they took me to the hospital, and I compression fractured a bunch of a bunch of vertebrae. Broke my tailbone, did a ton of nerve damage. I mean, it still pretty much haunts me today. I can't sit for very long. That lower portion of my back and my ass, they're actually numb. So I was really lucky, but for the most part, I've been back to the track a few times here and there, but I really got out of it and just kind of pushed all that effort, if you will, or pushed that passion towards off-road riding from that point forward.
But never got off the motorcycle. At that point, we go off-roading.
Yeah, I mean, it took some time to heal up and maybe get over the nerves, if you will, from that crash. But it was predominantly off-road riding thereafter, and Oregon's a great state for that. You have over 50 OHV areas and over 50% public land, so there was no shortage of opportunities, and then eventually that would morph into off-road racing.
Like hare scramble style, enduro? So
initially it started off, me and my dad were doing a series, so we were doing Grand Prix. They were, an hour and a half to 2 hours, which I think suited our style pretty well because a lot of the places, it was a mix of motocross, a mix of trail. So we did that for a couple seasons, and then my dad had to get out of the sport for a little while. He got melanoma in his eye. He had cancer in his eye, and it really jacked up his vision. He just can't really see that well anymore. So he kind of got out of that. And then I went just full blown, off-road, enduro, ISD, everything you could do off-road. That's what I focused on probably from 2011 till 2017.
Okay. Got pretty fast at that too, I'm assuming.
Well, I definitely got a lot better. And when I got into the expert ranks, I did win quite a few races. And, for the most part, I met most of my goals, got the national podium, got some top 10 overall. So I'm pretty content with what I've done as far as off-road racing, at least here on a local level. But, it didn't come without adversity. And, I learned more from those races I didn't finish or where I broke something on the bike than I did from the wins. Most of the time when I won, truth be told, it came pretty easy and there really wasn't too much adversity. At least especially after I had carpal tunnel surgery on both my wrists. That really held me back for a couple of years. You're out there racing for 3 hours and you can't feel the handlebars. But after I got that surgery done in 2012, my results, they definitely improved. But, back to the adversity, that really shaped the way I ride these days and the way I prepare my bikes and the way I prepare for things like tours. So a lot of hard lessons to be learned out there. A lot of ones you think that you let get away. Flat tires. I ripped off a radiator while leading a race one year. Just got impatient making some passes. So like I said, it definitely shaped the way I ride. And ultimately, if I get back into racing, which I think I will next year, it shapes the way you compete. But really love off-road racing and that whole scene and that environment. I've met so many good people and made so many friends being out there and competing.
That's awesome. I mean, we're obviously getting the background like on the racing, but so it's never left you. Where's this love of moto? Like, I mean, we all kind of have it. It's like once it's in your blood, it's like you can't imagine not doing it. And I even find that people who've like left moto and say they're not going to ride anymore still follow the sport and come back and do whatever kind of riding. Like, where did yours come from? Was it passed on from your dad?
Well, I definitely think it would have had to have been passed on from my dad. And you know how influential your parents are. So you grow up, you watch your dad ride and race all the time. You spend time out in the shop learning how to work on bikes. I mean, I think that's where it ultimately came from. But I always enjoyed the freedom that the motorcycle provided. Whatever problems you have or whatever work-related crap you got going on or, whatever the case may be, even, being injured and having issues with stuff like that, you still go out and ride and just forget about everything else in the moment and have a good day. And I think that's why it's important to me. It's like a therapy session.
I think that's so sick. And I feel like like where almost all of us listening would probably like have that same feeling. And there's, like playing like stick and ball sports, team sports, all that stuff's rad. But man, there's just something about like when you get on that dirt bike and it's just you and your helmet's on and you can't listen to music while you moto. It's just you with your own thoughts and paying attention to what's going on. Like say it's escapism, it's therapy, it's all those things. And I feel like we all kind of discover it at such a young age. I mean, sure, there's a part that is just supposed to be scary and fun. But then there's all of a sudden this like almost, philosophical part of like riding motos that's just too cool.
Yeah, there's been a few times in my life when I thought I was done with it or would step away from it. So it's kind of a fragmented thing here and there. I discovered some other things. I ran for a couple of years and did some half marathons and stuff like that and trained pretty seriously. Did a lot of backpacking, but all I ended up finding out was that stuff made me a better rider, and I came back to the bike and it was more fun. So it's really tough to get away, and I think at this point I've surrendered to the sport. I'm just going to continue to be or commit the rest of my life to a motorcycle adventure. I think that's what it's about for me.
Yeah, it's one of those cool things like where it's been around obviously for a long time, but the way that the manufacturers created bikes, like all that started to be purpose built for this. And then guys like yourself creating like, podcast and Instagram, like sharing it, I think made the sport, gave it even such a greater allure for the rest of us motorcycle guys who thought that you either could only race off road or you could race motocross. There wasn't all this other stuff. So thanks for bringing all that rad added attention to that side of the sport so that so many extra people can get out and not feel so as intimidated. And we sell more motorcycles and we get more people out riding, enjoying the scenery.
Yeah. And I think it's important to share that. Some people probably argue with that. There's definitely people that don't like some of the things I share, maybe at least on a local level, but I think it's important to get that out. There's a lot of people sitting at home, would-be adventure riders that are just wondering how they might start, or maybe they think they've got to pay somebody to go, which sounds counterintuitive to me, or at least to what I do. But there's some people that just need a nudge, and I think through having this business, that's the thing that I've taken away. The number one takeaway is that giving like free content back to people, advice, being a resource, helping influence their decisions. I think that's really what I value the most, and I think that's the most unserved or underserved part of this market right now.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, I'm going back to say, let's learn more about you. So schooling. So you're, as we know, you're pretty darn smart. Probably way too smart to be having a conversation with like a guy like me, but I'm honored to be that guy.
Look, I don't know if I'm smart, but I could tell you that I'm very well educated. I've had some great instructors at Portland State, Oregon State, and even the local community college in Albany, which is a really great school. At some point in my professional career, I decided, hey, how am I going to differentiate myself from people who want to take the next step or want to grow into the next role? So I thought, if I want to continue to climb that infamous corporate ladder, I need to couple education with my real world and life experience and job experience. So I did that, made the big sacrifice for a number of years, went to school full time, worked 50, 60 hours a week, just like you read about in every hard luck story, right? But I did that and put the hobbies to the side, and it served me well. I was able to reach and attain all the goals that I wanted to. But that being said, though, I don't necessarily think the degrees and the education are all that. I definitely know that a bachelor's degree, for instance, doesn't make you any sort of expert. It's just a signaling effect. You're ready to learn, in my opinion. And I say that because I have real world experience with people who've come out of college, they're thrust into leadership roles, and a couple weeks in, you go, geez, this person could really benefit from some more life experience or work experience. They're not empathetic. They don't treat their employees like human beings, and it's very frustrating as somebody who's been in leadership roles for a number of years, like myself. On the other side of the coin, there are people out there who work their way up the chain without any, formal or advanced or continuing education. And you kind of say the same thing. You say, when it's time to critically think or work through constraints, this person, could probably benefit from some college coursework or a degree or something like that. And, I always tell people that going to college, one of the greatest takeaways I have from that is just learning how to work amongst diverse groups of people. And look at today's workforce. It doesn't get much more diverse than all these generations in one workplace. So I think college is very valuable for that. But again, I'm not sure these bachelor's degrees are all that. And I don't say that, again, because, Gary Vee says, learn everything you need to learn on YouTube or Google it. I've just had the firsthand experience with it. So I think always and forever, it'll be, a combination of life experience and education. And however you prefer to get your education, if you're like me now, I have a pretty great thirst for knowledge. I burn through 4 or 5 books a week. I think the brain is a muscle. You don't want to experience atrophy. I think atrophy is the right word. So I continue to work that muscle. I want to learn a lot of new things, and truthfully, that's just a recipe that's worked for me for a long time and made me very successful. So that's the path I'm going to continue to walk down.
Do you enjoy your work?
Is that a real question? Of course not. I'm like most of Americans. I'm not really fulfilled or satisfied by my day job, but that's why I'm so laser focused on building businesses and nowadays online businesses that can help support the lifestyle that I want to live. And that lifestyle really revolves around motorcycle adventure and seeing and experiencing things that I never have before. So that's really where my focus is at right now. And, my parents are blue collar people with amazing work ethics. And I think they instilled that work ethic in me, but that's where we differ. I'm not so much afraid to take risks and jump off the boat and just work it out. So, just like last year, I took half the year off and enjoyed myself, and I'll probably do that again in the future. But we're going to continue to chip away at again building businesses and building things online that can ultimately lead to that coveted freedom.
I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that you don't want to work. It's like, I think it's such sometimes a dirty word / thought. And I'm like, hey, if you're a dreamer and you can figure out a way to do that other thing that makes you happy and still be able to live, man, why wouldn't you? It's scary, sure. And the more you got family and houses and stuff like that you have to pay for, the more you feel, trapped in the old rat race. As you and I both like to talk about books. It's like we read a lot of books, and it's I find inspiration in those. That's what I find inspiration in talking to you all the time. It's I love that we've developed a friendship. And again, say it one more time, I'm honored that you'd even let me be the guy to interview, because we talk all the time, and you always excite me when we get done like talking off the phone, because I get all the more motivated to take your energy and put it into Phoenix Handlebars. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've known you forever, though. It's one of those cliche things, but we hit it off. But I'll tell you what, and I'm sure you feel this way too. The older you get, 2 things happen. You start to value your time more, and you just can't put a price on that. And I forgot what the other thing I was going to say was, but yeah, my value for my personal time is just it's at an all-time high, and there's things that I haven't done that I want to go do, and I need to go do them. Otherwise, look, man, 40 years from now when I'm laying on my deathbed, I'm going to regret it, and I'm just not going to let that happen.
Yep, 100%. That's why I threw my hat in the ring. It's like I wasn't ready to give up on moto, and that's why I pulled my own money to create this company, and want to be satisfied, happy. And I don't even care about making the money as much as I just want to be able to use Phoenix Handlebars as a chance to be able to go to Bend and go ride with you and all that epic backcountry that you've got up there. And we're going to make that happen, hopefully this year soon.
It's just about setting things up to kind of live the lifestyle that you want to live. And for me, that's probably a fair amount of time out on the road over the next 2-3 years.
Yep. And I hope like a lot of us get to come up and enjoy it with you, man, because that would be so rad.
We'll make it happen.
So, all right. We've gone through the racing. We've gone through the school years. Now we're getting a little bit older. Where did this come from? When did Ben Motorcycle Adventures like pop into your head and you had the balls to like start recording a podcast? Because that's rad.
The idea of owning or managing or running your own business, that's nothing new to me. But this particular idea came to me in spring of 2016, and I was thinking, how can I do something in the motorcycle industry and ultimately work my way out of the grind, if you will. And the idea of moving to Central Oregon and running motorcycles, became front of mind for me. I know there was another business over here, and I think they sold out and relocated. But I thought, hey, what if you offer high-end dual sports for rental and go from there? What might happen?
Yeah. So you started. Your first thing was doing motorcycle rental.
Yep, that's how it started out. I never envisioned this business any other way than just simply renting motorcycles.
Were you doing tours at that time, or were you just, hey, here's your
Nope.
Katoom, go enjoy yourself, knock yourself out?
Nope. And to this day, the bulk of the business has been rentals, which pretty much booked out through June of this year, and then after that, I'm gonna get out of that. I'm not really passionate about renting motorcycles. It's actually a pretty solid business and business plan for this area, but we get back to that whole valuing your time, and that's kind of detracting from my own motorcycle adventures. So I'm gonna put my focus elsewhere, create content, develop more businesses, and just kind of go from there.
Awesome. Well, like I say, as long as you keep doing cool stuff and keeping the moto community stoked, and you're stoked, that's a win-win. So then motorcycle rentals, when does the podcast enter the picture?
Well, the idea to podcast is actually, for me at least, it's pretty old. It's about 3 years old. I bought all of the equipment that I'm actually still using today for the most part. I bought that in 2016, and I'm a motocross fanatic. I thought I was going to start to do a weekly motocross podcast, not unlike Pulp MX, for instance. So that's where the idea came from. But reality is most of this stuff sat idle for about 3 years. And back in 2016, I did mess around with the software Audacity. I recorded some stuff. I did voiceover for some supercross races, just experimenting, but never really got my foot out the door, right? Never really started until November of this past year. And I think I reeled off like 5 kind of introductory motorcycle podcasts, and then we've really grown from there. It's pretty cool.
Were you nervous to talk? Did you feel pretty comfortable?
I'm always a little bit nervous. We're 36 episodes in now. I'm a little bit more comfortable, but it's never great hearing your own voice. You have a tendency to critique your mannerisms and things like that. I don't listen back to the episodes once they're published. Obviously, I have to listen to them along the way as I edit them, but I'm getting more comfortable behind the mic. I'm going to do some other kind of different stuff here in the future, but it was tough initially.
Yeah, I get it. It's the when you did the one with me, like however 3 or 4 weeks ago, whatnot, the wife wanted to listen, and I'm like, nope. Well, inevitably I did, because you want to make sure you don't screw up, and it's like, man, you sound like an idiot. Got to fix that. So I get it. Yeah,
practice and repetition, they're totally your friend. Again, we're 36 episodes in. I'm getting more comfortable, and I want to keep this thing going, 500 episodes, 1,000 episodes, and that doesn't happen if I don't continue to try to improve and provide higher value content each and every week for listeners.
I've always wanted to know, how did you start reaching out to some of these big names, people who are obviously influencers, but air quotes on influencers of our sport. How did you start reaching out to them?
This is kind of ironic. We've been sitting here talking about valuing our free time, and then I'm reaching out to people, asking them to give me an hour or 2 out of one of their days to record an episode. But I really have no reservations about asking the worst that can happen is they can tell me no, and I respect that. I would never ask somebody again or try to pressure them into doing the show. But the reality is, if I'm not reaching out, then the only person that the listeners are going to hear from is me, and that's not particularly great content. So I'm going to continue to reach out, and hopefully someday people will just want to come on the show, and that'll make for some really great content. Not going to lie, the people that don't respond, come on, man. I know you got my email. That's a little bit frustrating and unprofessional, but for the most part, everybody's been really respectable and said yes or no one way or the other.
Yeah, you're being unprofessional not to respond. What always scares me, into making sure that I text you back with it under 10 minutes, so I don't anger you.
Get out of here with that. That's a bunch of crap. But seriously, there's a lot of people on social media and in this industry as a whole who think they're above everybody or think their shit doesn't stink, to be frank. And if you're that kind of a person, I probably don't want to talk to you anyway. So from that perspective, it's all good. When I think about it from a big corporation and a business perspective, it's just common courtesy to get back to people. And I always talk to my employees and emphasize, the importance of cross-functional relationships in the workplace and in life. You may help somebody out or answer a question for them today, 3 months from today, or, tomorrow, whatever the case may be. They may help you out with some large-scale project that they otherwise wouldn't have helped you at if you hadn't been, professional and prompt. So, my advice when people shoot you an email or have a question or something, people DM me every single day on Instagram asking me about parts and gear and things like that. And I try to get back to them as soon as possible. I think it's just, I don't want to call it a professional courtesy, being on social media, but it's the right thing to do. If you're going to put yourself out there and put content out there, you should be somebody who is accessible to the masses.
Yeah, it burns me because it's I'm normally trying to be pretty quick on that stuff. So then you've sort of set precedent. So when I don't reply back to my wife quickly, then she assumes that there's something, that there's a problem because I'm too good at replying quickly. I'm probably just doing a mountain bike ride and have my headphones on, don't hear it, chasing rattlesnakes. All right, so what's next? Where does this go from here, man?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this before we got going and recording today, but I'm building another website, I guess behind the scenes, but it's it'll be a site dedicated to dual sport and adventure motorcycle riding, and I'm thinking, gear reviews, gear tests, product reviews, product tests, stories from the road, interviews in long form written content, possibly rebranding the podcast and putting it under that name too. So that's kind of the angle I'm coming from. Also, the KTM 790 is on the horizon, and I think that bike will be a large part of that platform if it ever decides to surface here in the great state of Oregon.
What's the delivery date on that thing?
That's a really good question, actually. Originally I was told May, then I heard that the dealers are only going to get a couple a piece and the other models won't arrive until October. I've seen June and July thrown around recently. I reached out to my dealer last week. I think I irritated him by asking, but I really don't know. And, there's really nothing I can do at this point. If it drags out too long, I'm probably just going to go ahead and pass on it. I think, if we get late into summer, I'm not going to get a bunch of time on it. And I've had bad luck with first year models in the past. So I may just pass on it and wait to see what 2020 has to offer. I'd definitely love to have the bike, but let's be honest. I have 5 in the garage. We just got a new 250. I'm working with my girlfriend on her riding skills, and we're guiding a tour through Idaho in September, which is going to be an amazing time. So I've got plenty on my plate, and if it doesn't work out with the 790, I'll just wait till Gerald Ortiz gets his and see what he has to say about it.
Yeah. Speaking of adventure lights, Gerald Ortiz, he asked, why don't you like to ride with the superior Italian red race?
Does he get paid by Beta? I don't. He says he doesn't, but man, I don't know. Why don't I? I'd love to try out a Beta and compare it against the KTMs that I'm very familiar with. But Garrett's a pretty funny guy, and it's cool that he's passionate about the sport, and he creates and crafts a lot of content that's free for people to utilize and reference. So it was cool having him on the show, and I've had a lot of interactions with him. His head and his heart are most definitely in the right place. And the most important thing is the guy gets out there and rides, and like me, I don't care what you ride, just get out there. But I do like to give him a hard time about riding those Italian bikes.
Just ride. Yeah. Here. That's one of the things that I thought was so cool. And I don't know if I might have brought this up we did our show, but when the Wolfpack Enduro, I think what it was called way back when I remember when they first started posting photos and they were so epic. One of the things that I loved about it was like, you'd see this XR 350 that they would make look so rad in a photo. And you're like, man, not that long ago, it would have been laughable to go out like on some old bike like that. But then all of a sudden everything kind of changed where it's like, no, man, it's just cool to go ride. Who cares what you're on? Just swing a leg over a bike and get out there. So props to them probably for helping kind of change that stigma of what's cool.
Yeah, I think riding is cool, and I think vintage is cool, but I'll be honest, I didn't get into the dual sport ADV stuff for a long time because of the bikes. I mean, if you look at your Honda until recently, your Cowie, your Suzuki, and no offense to anybody that rides KLRs or DRs, but those bikes haven't been updated in years, and they're not targeted at me as a consumer. They're not targeted at this market. So, KTM kind of changed the game 5 or 6 years ago and made dual sport and adventure riding more sexy. And, that drew me in. So they sold me. But these days, dude, I don't care what you ride. Let's just get out there and put some miles behind us.
Well, I might be behind you, but I might be on a TTR 125 like right now. So that's all I got out there.
That's all you got.
Yeah. Well, I'll just show up and I'll be factory rider for a couple of days, like in the Bend Motorcycle Adventure canopy. That's the plan.
That works. We've got a few bikes here.
So it's rad. I think like everything that you're always saying, it's like you're going to keep laser focused like on this dual sport / adventure bike market and talking to those people and giving them their voice and content and stuff, right? You're not going motocross in spite of the fact that we all love to watch moto, but
I'm a huge moto fan. I know that I've watched every motocross and supercross for the past 30 years at least, but I think that market's pretty saturated. Pulpamex, Racer X, Vital, the list goes on and on. I think there's some gaps in the off-road and dual sport ADV market, and then I'm just going to try to focus on that niche for the most part. I think it's a good space, and most importantly to me, it's one that I'm really passionate about. I've been around so long. I've seen all these off-road riding areas taken from us or shrunk down in size, and seen more users, more recreationalists funneled into smaller places, smaller spaces. I don't think off-road prevails in the long run. I think dual sport and ADV wins out, and the electric bikes that can travel long distances anyways or are suitable for off-road, I think there are ways out too. So I'm going to focus on that. I think that'll be one of the last things to go. I think you'll still be able to legally ride a plated bike on these backcountry discovery routes and roads, and that's the future for me, and I think that's going to be the future for a lot of us riders here moving forward.
Well, that makes me think. You bring up a lot of places that are local to you, and I think like, okay, well, if you want this thing to go to the next level, like, do you have like dreams, those aspirations of like hanging up the aerospace stuff? And next thing we know, you're hosting your shows, but from Colorado, from Montana, from Alaska, from South America. Is that something that would excite you?
Oh, without a doubt. We talk about it all the time. It's just a matter of getting to a place with online businesses and my girlfriend finishing up her degree and just getting situated in life to do those things. But I'm a realist too. Entrepreneurship is a grind we all we seem to hear about are these overnight success stories. And maybe that was the case, 20, 25 years ago or whatever, when the web was really coming online and people could capitalize on it from an entrepreneur's perspective. But for the most part these days, nothing new is created. When you have an idea or a product, somebody's already in that space. It's already super competitive. So you have to find a way to distinguish yourself from your competitors. And I think it takes a long time. It takes a lot of commitment, and there's a lot of 18, 20-hour days out there. And I'm sure you're feeling that too. Let's just be honest. But yeah, we're definitely looking to do something different.
Yep. We're got bucket list places that you want to ride before you're, like, say you're laying on that deathbed 40 years from now.
Most definitely. Iceland. There's a motorcycle touring company in Iceland, and the landscapes, the riding, everything looks amazing. I want to go there so bad. Maybe next year. That's what I always say, but definitely want to get up there and do that ride. I've also kind of got this grand vision of a ride that would include or touch every backcountry discovery route in the States, and then go up to Alaska, Arctic Circle, and back. I'd love to do that, from April to October, maybe one year. So that's definitely on my agenda. And then, the Pan American, it's definitely, the more people that I talk to on this podcast, and I just interviewed somebody the other day about it, it's definitely on my radar. I've heard some things about Central America that could be kind of a turnoff. I don't really know. I don't want to go to borders and haggle and pay people to get across the line or whatever the case may be. So we'll see what comes. But I've got plenty of bucket list rides that I want to knock out before it's all said and done.
I know we like to read. Any suggestions on books that have been making you motivated lately?
This is kind of crazy, but I'm actually reading my 30th book of the year, and it's called Contagious: Why Things Catch On. And I guess I'm reading that for, from a marketing perspective and trying to understand the virality of certain topics, subjects, or content or whatever. But that's an interesting book for you leaders out there, small business, large corporation. There's a book called Good to Great that I would highly recommend. Grant Cardone, The 10X Rule. To summarize, you need to work harder. You need to set your goals higher. Platform, that's kind of a personal branding book, which is very interesting. Atomic Habits. Anything by Seth Godin. This is Marketing. And then Purple Cow. That's an all-timer for me. Jocko Willenick, Extreme Ownership. Anything by Gary Vaynerchuk. Some of it's a little bit older, a few years older, but still very relevant. Book by Amy Schmidauer that talks about YouTube. And then listen to a book called Lone Rider, written by Elspeth Beard, who was the first woman to actually ride a motorcycle around the world. And she's going to come on the podcast at maybe a month or two when she gets through all of her engagements. But that one was really good. And then, of course, if you haven't listened to it or read it, there's a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, which I don't know if it's really relevant to any niche or industry or anything like that, but it's a very interesting book. And it starts out a little bit slow when they're talking about the hockey stuff, but it really picks up, and then I couldn't put it down. I
always think everything always circles back around to moto. Outliers is one where he talks about having 10,000 hours of anything to become an expert. And instantly I thought, man, how many hours did Ricky Carmichael and McGrath put in? It's like, you're like, I mean, Ricky Carmichael, while, yeah, he was fast as could be, it's like, he was chubby. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like he overcome so much stuff. I mean, he was short, chubby, like all these things that should have definitely made him not be the fastest guy to ever swing a leg over a bike. But, something in that heart and soul of his, and maybe those 10,000 hours really did pay off.
When you think about a guy like Ricky, he started riding at 5, right? And he didn't stop till he was 28. I mean, just the amount of hours he amassed and the practice and the things he would know, the little details he would know that most of us would ever know in regards to handling the bike. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, like dude, there was a million things that I ended up really like loving that guy. When I worked at Fox, he would come to the office, and I remember like one day I was walking in, and he was still sitting in a car. I don't know if he was with like Pete Fox or who was with JH, and he sees me and he starts like waving like all wildly, like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And I'm sitting here like looking around, like there must be somebody cooler than me behind me, but no, that was Ricky. I was just a dude, but he was like always cool to like wave and say hi, and I thought that's pretty darn cool. You're the fastest dude like to ever swing a leg over a dirt bike, and you're waving at me like I'm somebody. So then I was an instant fan from that point on. It's like you won me over. You waved at me. I'm your best fan.
Yeah, I hear people bash him quite a bit for the broadcast, the Supercross broadcast, but I'm like, man, have some respect. This guy put it all on the line out there for years and years and years. And one thing that I really respect, all the times he went to Des Nations, which seems to be becoming less and less of a thing for these guys. They seem to think that they're too important to do that. So I really respect the guy. And yeah, I mean, he's the greatest motorcycle rider, racer I've ever seen. So
right. The greatest motocross rider ever, not the greatest like broadcaster ever. So yeah, give the cat a break. It's like, I mean, it's his first real season of sitting up there. It's got to be pretty intimidating. It's like, it's like he's...
Who would know better? Who else would you want to hear in the booth? Who would know better what these guys are going through and what they're trying to figure out there?
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes the grief that he catches is that he's not saying those things, but it's like, hey man, I'm sure there's like, say, the learning curve of knowing like, well, how far can I go? You don't want to call people out and say that, man, that Tomac guy really needs to get his head out of his ass. Say stuff like that. Like up there, he's got to kind of play a little bit of PC. I get it, but give him time. And he'll be good. But
dude, I could tell you what, if he wasn't in the booth, he would say that. I think I can confirm that because I was at Washougal one year, and it was after the second moto. I was wandering through the pits, trying to get some autographs. And Wyndham beat him that year, and I think it was the year that Wyndham had a 450 and Ricky was just riding a 250. And he was washing off his boots with a pressure washer, and it's like 95 degrees, and that dude was pissed that he got second. I mean, he didn't have to say a word. You could tell. I mean, just a total fighter. But I mean, he's real like the rest of us. He's totally how do I want to say that? He's kind of restrained by the booth.
Yeah. One of the other, I don't know if I brought this one up, but I was doing fit and wear test stuff for Fox, and we were working on the Fox Instinct boot. And dude, it's like pulling, getting the lotto ticket for me. I got to fly out to his house, went out to his pad, then we went over to the farm. Dungy was still there. It's when Dungy was wearing Nike boots, and then Dungy bailed like for the day, and then we worked with Ricky like on the Instinct boot, but just hanging out in the garage with Big Rick, cracking Coors Lights. Ricky, who was a little bit chubbier at the time and wasn't racing full, but he's just a dude. It's like you forget that he's the greatest racer of all time. It's almost like on that day he just became just a dude to me, and it was so cool. But yeah, he's certainly he's got a lot of character and personality. Sometimes you don't get a chance to see that sometimes like on camera, but he's a right on guy. All right. Well, what other stuff do you want to what else didn't we cover? Like with my amateur hour interview skills here, what else do you want to tell me about?
You know what? I think we covered it all, man. And we're coming up on an hour here. So let's wrap it up. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to not be a guest, but to put your amateur hour, quote unquote, interviewing skills on display. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm not going to keep you anymore. Thanks for having me, Jason.
I just want to say, man, keep doing what you're doing to help educate, because that's the one part where it's like there's those two parts where some people need more advanced information, but there's a lot of guys like me who I consider an advanced motorcyclist who still doesn't know a lot of the nuances of what should I carry, what tools, lighting, and again, where do I go? So you're doing awesome things. Keep that up. Don't take your hand off the throttle, man.
Not going to be a problem, Jason. I got that under wraps. Hey, thanks for coming on the show and hosting this particular episode. Listeners, at Phoenix Handlebars on both Facebook and Instagram. If you're in the market for some new bars, don't forget to hit up Jason. And I think we still got a discount code out there, probably Ben20, if my memory serves me correct. So again, at Phoenix Handlebars on Facebook and Instagram, get a hold of Jason and he will set you up. So this is normally the point in the episode when I plug my website, benmotorcycleadventures.com. And unfortunately, this past weekend, the website became compromised. Somebody put some malware on there, and it was a mess. I had to pay some people to, go through the back door and clean this thing up. And thankfully, they were able to restore it for the most part. But unfortunately, I've lost about 60 blog posts, including all of my podcast episodes. So I checked on iTunes. They're still all available, but I was using this feed for iTunes. I use a different feed for all of my other, or all the other podcast directories like Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and even YouTube. So those episodes aren't going anywhere, but some of my previous episodes, at least on iTunes, may be unavailable for a while. I may have to upload them again, unfortunately, and I can't believe somebody would take the time out of their day to mess with my janky little website. But that's where we're at, benmotorcycleadventures.com. Everything is restored, everything's good, but again, 60 blog posts, lots of hard work and time down the tube. That's really unfortunate. Regardless, moving forward, I've got another episode of this podcast coming out next week with another adventurer who rode the Pan American Highway. Really looking forward to having this guest on. So without further ado, guys, I'm going to cut out of here. And thanks for listening to episode 36, Adventure Rider. We will see you next week.